Hello, I'm Trudy Friend and I'm going to talk in this programme about how to use Inktense water-soluble pencils, and I'm using a building as the subject. And I've started off by a quick outline sketch to put the building in position, and I'm going through many of the strokes you've already seen. So the first one will be neutral grey that I'm going to use for the roof, the tiled roof, and that'll be done with the on-off erratic pressure stroke. And I'm working from above and downwards, only because it's more convenient and more comfortable for me to work this way, keeping them reasonably close together and using a bit of the zigzag application to get the effect of those old uneven tiles. And a lot of these strokes really lend themselves to the very natural textures. So I'm nearly at the base now and onto the last row, a little bit uneven there. So that's that roof in place, and I'm now going to put this one in place. Again, working along in the same movement, but this roof is receding more, so I'm trying to get the strokes closer together still. And I might also leave certain areas with hardly any pressure on them at all, adding a little interest and light to that part of the roof. These pencils for detailed areas need to be sharpened quite frequently, and what I do is I sharpen them into palette wells rather than into the bin, and then I can reconstitute them and use them as if I was using a watercolour palette, and approaching the area that has a little bit of greenery growing up over the edge, so I don't really want to come all the way down on some areas. And I'm going to take another colour for the wall, and for that it's going to be an Indian ink. Before I started I did make a layout of colours so that I knew which ones I wanted to use on it, and Indian ink I thought was quite a nice undercoat drawing colour for the wall. Now the wall comprises a lot of small stones, so I'm using actually some of the texture of the paper. It's Saunders Waterford CP knot, which has a nice texture to the surface, and that texture lends itself to being followed with some of these pencil strokes. And I'm not drawing all over it because I don't want it to appear stone after stone. I want to give an effect, an impression of the stone wall, and also the wall here, but here perhaps even less because the light is hitting this wall much more strongly than the other one. Just enough in some areas to blend the colour, to get the base colour down. I'm going to get a charcoal grey to fill in the darks. So there's a little bit of dark at the top of here, and then it gets lighter, and at the top of here, and we've got the dark inside these. And charcoal grey has a slight greenish tinge to it. It's quite a pleasant grey. So I've got dark in there. And underneath the eaves I will go back to the first colour I used, the neutral grey, and a zigzag down here, quite a quick zigzag to get the feel of that, and then a more gentle zigzag this side, which I will enhance later, and just put a little bit of dark around that lamp. I'm just going to wash it now with a little water to see how the colours are coming out, and it's gently touching the surface, not washing all over. I don't want it to all blend and disappear. I want to follow the direction of my strokes, and the first coat just blends it gently. And again for the other side, I'm looking closely at how that cuts in there, and thinking at the base of how the green's going to come up. So I'm going to just move around the green that overlaps it, and a little bit of water under here. I'll fill in some of those whites later because I might glaze with another colour there. So I'm just going to pull that wall colour down. And here I am hoping for quite a bit of blending because I want the wall to actually go into a colour. And then I'll let that dry off while I'm doing some of the greenery. And after that I'm going to put some shadow at the top. So for the front, again, very gently just blend some of these little markings for the stones. All this is just an undercoat, it's just to get the thing on the move and start to get a feeling for the solidity of it. And now into the dark in here, and that is a rich dark, pulling it down from the shadows there. Inktense pencils, when they're completely dry, as long as everything has been covered with water, dry permanent, and so it is very nice to sometimes put washes over the top, knowing that what's underneath will still remain there and won't move. So I've got the lighter tone down the bottom there and a bit of shadow here, just gently taking the shadow across from what's already been wet. And to get the window done, I'll need a slightly smaller brush. So I'm going on to the detailer, the large detailer, and I'm just going to gently blend the charcoal grey in here. These bars, when I took the photo, I noticed that they are quite irregular. They do bend a little, so you can be quite swift when you put in things that have this sort of character. It's nice to have this old English character feel about them. And then just washing across the top to give you the shadow. And because most of the colour has been used with the water on, it's not going to blend too much. You've got the feeling of recess there. And a little bit of dark under here as well. I'm just going to go on to the greenery now. I want to choose an olive because that's quite a nice colour to use neat on it straight off. And what I'm looking for are the negative shadow shapes in between all that foliage. So I'm putting in shadow shapes really, rather than putting in the positive leaf shapes at the moment. So I'm doing my crisscross approach for this, and I'm crisscrossing into those dark shapes that I see. And there's a lovely dark in there, so I really emphasise that to get it to go back. Underneath here I need some dark again, but there's some green trailing down over it, so I'll just gently pull in some of that trailing green. And also we have the greenery going up across here. So the last little bits of dark, and then I'm hoping that a lot of this will blend to give me the green I want. And then I can just go into the window shapes. I'm not going to go for too much detail. As it goes away, I want the emphasis to be on the building here, the larger part of it. So it's just very lightly crisscrossing. And I'll just have a look and see how much of that will move before I go on with adding more. Filling in something like this does take a little time, but you don't want to put in too much detail. There's no need to put in every leaf or to look at it in that way. Just give the impression of the foliage trailing down the side of the building. Right, I'm just going to have a little look at it now and think about where I'll go next. I think I'm going to start the chimneys next. Having started certain areas, it looks as if they need now to have something on them so that I can start comparing everything. So I'm choosing a madder brown, which I want to put on very pale because I don't really want them to stand out too dark at the moment, and I think I'll just graze it on so that I can just get the colour established. So it's very light grazing over all the chimneys, and then I'll wet them and see what sort of intensity I have. Because the one in the far distance doesn't need too much detail, but they are very important to get them in place. So I'll see what they look like with a little bit of water on them. Notice I don't just go over the whole thing. I'm working my way across and I'm thinking about which direction to put the brush strokes. And looking at that and my photograph, I might just add a little bit of yellow, sort of an ochre colour, or just something to get a little bit of warmth into that, and then into the final one at the back.